As a member of a youth-led international organisation, I can see that the policies that have the most positive impact on young people's lives and futures around the world are those that value harm reduction over incarceration, and I would encourage all of you in Lithuania to follow these good practices.
Unfortunately, majority of Eastern Europe and Central Asia countries still are not very pragmatic in drug policy. Countries invest money for catching people, chasing people, imprisoning people, and keeping people in prisons, but not to develop the comprehensive services, harm reduction services, for people who need it. So I hope that Lithuanian government and decision makers will be pragmatic in their drug policy to save lives and to save future abuse.
So in Southeast Asia, Malaysia used to have some of the highest HIV rates, and that was most amongst people who inject drugs. Malaysia introduced a range of harm reduction measures, especially needle syringe programs and opioid substitution treatment programs, and as a result they now have they've managed to significantly reduce that rate of HIV. The thing is, it doesn't go far enough because the drug laws haven't changed, and so people who use drugs and people who engage in other drug related offences continue to go into prisons at a really high rate. So now in Malaysia, a debate that's now going forward slowly is around decriminalising the use and the possession of drugs, and we hope that that's something that's moving forward for you too in Lithuania.
In a joint statement last year, the United Nations Chief Executive Board unanimously recommended that member states should decriminalize the possession of small drug amounts for personal use. And in Norway next year, we will be voting for a progressive new drug policy reform that heeds this recommendation. And we ask or hope that Lithuania will join us in bringing about more health and human rights oriented drug policies in the Nordics, the Baltics, Europe and the world.
My name is Dr. James Nichols. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Transformed Drug Policy Foundation in the UK. Across the world, governments are realising that drug prohibition has failed. We've been working with governments in Canada, North America, Uruguay and Europe to help them develop alternatives to prohibition. We know that the criminalisation of people who use drugs causes more problems than it solves, and it leaves the trade in the hands of criminals rather than the government, licensed retailers and doctors. We're calling on all governments to look again at drug policy and to try and make a better future.
20 years ago, Portugal had the highest rate of new HIV cases. But with decriminalization of drugs, we have changed the situation, and now we are one of the countries with the lowest rates of new HIV cases.
Repressive and punitive drug policies don't work. In fact, they've led to human rights disasters all around the world. They have led to mass incarceration, extrajudicial killings, thousands of overdose deaths, and these are valuable lives that have been lost, as well as they've led to very high prevalence rates of HIV and hepatitis C. It's time for the Lithuanian government to decriminalise drug use and possession and move from punitive responses to human rights and evidence-based policy making.
I live in the Netherlands, a country which has implemented harm reduction measures many years ago and decriminalised partially the use of drugs. Decriminalisation works. The number of HIV infection in our country is low, just as the number of people who are using hard drugs.
Almost all of the problems that society associates with drug use are actually problems that are created or exacerbated by drug prohibition. And by ending prohibition and moving into a harm reduction perspective in regards to substance use, we can eliminate or mitigate almost every one of these problems.
Hi, I'm Neil Woods. I'm a former undercover police officer and board member of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Harm reduction should be invested in. Heroin should be prescribed by a doctor rather than sold by gangsters. There are evidence-based health approaches which can make a real impact, but investing in policing has no impact. I'm sure that the police in Lithuania are really, really good at what they do. I'm sure they're very good at catching drug dealers and filling up prisons, but they don't reduce the size of the market. only treating it as a health issue can do that.
Decriminalisation of drug possession is a smart policy option. 29 countries across the world have either ended criminal sanctions for possession of all drugs or for cannabis. None have seen an increase in drug use, but many have actually experienced positive health, social and economic outcomes. As I say, it's a smart policy option.
Hello everyone, my name is Olga and I'm a senior policy analyst at Harm Reduction International. Research shows that harm reduction not only saves lives, but it also saves money. Despite this, many governments still choose to spend huge amounts of money on punitive drug policies that don't work. Our modeling shows that a small redirection of funds from law enforcement to harm reduction could end AIDS among people who use drugs. Decriminalizing drug use would actually save governments lots of money. It's a smart choice.
The government of my country, Hungary, adopted a national drug strategy in 2013, which dreamt about creating a drug-free country by 2020. Despite all the repression against drug users, drug use has not been reduced, but harms of drug use have increased. Don't make the same mistake, decriminalize drug use.
Decriminalization is a common sense policy to reduce the stigma and treat problematic drug use as a medical issue and not a criminal justice one. There are many examples around the world where decriminalization has put in place with positive results.
The criminalization of the use of drugs remains a fundamental barrier to the achieving a just and equitable society. Do not rob the youth of their future. Decriminalize the use of drugs. Don't increase the harm by putting them in jail.